Enough is enough!
This morning, the crisis in public housing. No heat, no hot water. Tenants now raising the heat against the city, whose fix doesn't kick in until July. Plus, the jitters on Wall Street. Stocks taking sharp losses. Is it the beginning of a down economy? How will it affect your wallet? Hear what our economist has to say.
Now, from 42nd and 2nd, this is Pix 11 News Closeup with Marvin Scott.
Good morning, everyone. It's a state of emergency of mammoth proportions. Some 320,000 residents, that's 80% of those living in the city's public housing units, who have endured frigid days of this winter without heat or hot water in their apartments. NYCHA, the city agency responsible for maintaining the properties, claims it's doing what it can with the resources it has to rectify the problem. They blame some of its failures on City Hall. But beleaguered residents, they cry poor management, incompetence, and they're turning up the heat now on the agency's chairwoman to be removed. She was among those on the hot seat during a City Hall hearing on the crisis this past Tuesday. My colleague Monica Morales was there.
Enough is enough!
They screamed, they cried,
crying yourself to sleep because it's so unbelievably and painfully cold.
And they testified to the city council in a public hearing that lasted hours at City Hall. Thousands in our city right now need heat in public housing. They blame the mayor and the commissioner, who was sitting in the front row. She had to listen. Commissioner, what do you want to say to families of NYCHA? They're asking you to step down, Commissioner. NYCHA higher-ups came face-to-face with outraged families and angry city council members who say the agency is broken. And the speaker, Corey Johnson, first demanded an apology from the commissioner, Shola Olatoye.
Just say, we are sorry. We're sorry that it's gotten to this point. I'm not saying it's all your fault, but you're the leader of the agency.
The numbers are shocking and worse than we thought. 320,000 no heat or no hot water complaints. That's more than 80% of residents living in NYCHA. Another bombshell. Heating plant technicians, the numbers went down, a huge drop in personnel. Who is watching our city's boilers?
There's a whole lot of bullshit going over the same thing over and over.
NYCHA, either do your job or step down and bring somebody in that could do the work.
Pix 11 News has been front and center in the fight for freezing families, bringing the heat to 55 buildings this winter. The mayor and the city have been watching. A week ahead of this hearing, the mayor gave $200 million for new boilers. The mayor has stood by the commissioner of NYCHA after a lead paint scandal and now this heating crisis. Many question her future now. And we got an exclusive with the new general manager of NYCHA. Are you confident that you answered all the questions and that these family members who have had no heat for all these months, I mean, you're the new boss. What do you want to say to them direct? That's our viewers.
Well, I don't officially start for another 3 weeks. And I am confident that the responses that were given here today were given truthfully.
Certainly dodging the bullet there. Well, Monica Morales has been at the forefront of Pix News coverage of the housing crisis. An incredible job she's been doing. Her efforts have helped to get heat and hot water restored in 55 buildings. So good to have you with us this morning, Monica.
Thank you. It is an honor to be
congratulations
here.
on for all those residents who you've helped and got that heat and hot water back.
It's been a road. It's been a rough road, and the council member will join me on that, because when you're fighting for justice for families in our city, it's not easy.
Let me introduce the councilman who we're really delighted to have with us this morning. Councilman Ritchie Torres. He's the chairman of the Council Committee on Oversight and Investigations, spearheading that probe into the failures of NYCHA. I did have to tell you, I invited NYCHA to join us, and we were told no one was available, and they said, let the City Hall hearing speak for itself. So if I could begin by asking you, so what did that hearing say?
Well, look, some historical context. You know, NYCHA has been so savagely starved of funding at every level of government that it's come to accumulate about $25 billion worth of capital needs. So it's true that the crisis of emergency at the New York City Housing Authority stems from deep disinvestment. But it also stems from deep dysfunction within the New York City Housing Authority. And the hearing revealed that NYCHA misled the public about the true nature and scale of the heating crisis. The chairperson in early January said that 97% of the apartments had consistent heat and hot water. Our investigation told a different and a more disturbing story, that 323,000 residents had no heat and hot water at various points, that out of 175,000 units in the public housing portfolio, 143,000 of them had no heat and hot water on an average of 48 hours.
So she lied.
Well,
I would say there's no basis for the assertion that 97% of the residents in public housing had heat and hot water.
and Marvin, you know, you've been to so many of these hearings. It was electric.
Yeah.
That hearing is a turning point for our city. And when that stat came out, you could hear a pin drop. No one could believe it. 80%. If any private landlord did that, there would be criminal charges, Marvin. So all of these stories we've been doing, little by little, we've been uncovering, you know, this development doesn't have heat, this development doesn't have heat. Now 55, I mean, we tell NYCHA there's a problem, and then all of a sudden they turn the heat back on, they fix the boilers. Why aren't they doing it already? Why does it take the shaming, the public shaming to do it? Why does it take Councilmember Ritchie, Torres, and his staff to bring this to light is the question. Why isn't there an urgency? I mean, there's the outrage, but where's the urgency to fix things?
Now, I understand residents have to submit a ticket, and there has not been adequate reporting of the problems, and this goes back for several months.
Well, I think we uncovered in the hearing that NYCHA has a pattern of closing complaints of work orders without actually solving the problem.
That's right.
So even though there are causes of heating loss beyond a boiler failure, you know, there could be problems with the pipes, problems with the radiator, problems with insulation in the apartment. Once NYCHA repairs the boiler, it closes all the work orders, heat and hot water work orders in that building, without actually verifying whether there's been a restoration of heat and hot water in individual apartments.
Marvin, everyone's going to be watching your show, okay? This show is going to be hot, and I'm telling you why, because people are angry, and they know what we're talking about. They're living it right now with their children, their grandmas, they don't have heat, and then guess what? They keep putting in tickets, like you said, Marvin, and no one is listening, and they close them out like they fixed it. And who does that? And why is it happening for years now? It is time for a change. And the families have spoken. They're watching our coverage. They're writing to us every single day. And we're not going to stop. We're not going to go away. Because I know the city and others would like this to just, and it's not.
Now, is it this incompetence on the part of management of NYCHA? Does this fall on the chairwoman, Olatoya?
I would say so. There have been a series of budget, personnel, and policy choices that took a crisis and made it far worse for the residents in public housing. NYCHA has too few boiler technicians. And those boiler technicians...
You lost 30% of them.
30% of them over a 4-year period.
That's huge.
And those boiler technicians have too little training. In order to be a boiler technician, you have to complete a civil service exam and a training and a certification. We uncovered in our investigation that neither the exam nor the training has been given since 2015.
That's outrageous.
So 2 years ago, NYCHA shut down the pipeline of trained boiler technicians. And the impact of shutting down the pipeline was felt in October of 2017 when NYCHA, at the very beginning of the heating season, lost almost 100 boiler technicians and had no pipeline of trained professionals to replace them.
Now, the mayor supports the chairwoman. He supports. Do you feel she should step down? There's a call for her to be removed. Well, and what is the mayor's role here?
She knowingly filed a false certification with the federal government. Right? She has submitted false testimony to the city council not on one but 2 occasions. She has presided haplessly over what I would call a humanitarian crisis, where
it is a humanitarian
hundreds of thousands
crisis.
of residents had no heat and hot water. There should be accountability.
And you know what? Every tenant association president, they have different views on this. They just want a solution, Marvin, but many are calling for her to go. They need new blood. They need a new leader at the top. Now, some would support her completely, saying we don't want to lose the CEO, they say, until this is all fixed. I mean, it would be too much change, but we need change now.
Let's take a break and come back. We know what the problem is. We're hearing all the cries of the residents. What do we have to do to rectify the problem? We'll explore that further when Pix 11 News Close-Up continues. Stay with us. Back now with City Councilman Ritchie Torres and my colleague Monica Morales talking about the NYCHA housing crisis. You had a hearing, a volatile hearing on Tuesday. What comes out of that now?
Look, I think the lesson learned is that even more important than the age of the boilers is the maintenance of the boilers. So we have to ensure that NYCHA has the capacity to maintain its own boilers. I'll provide you with a quick example. In Staten Island, there's a boiler dating back to 1950. And that 70-year-old boiler is so well maintained that it's outperforming boilers that are younger by decades. And the reason is that it's maintained by seasoned technicians. So we have to ensure that NYCHA has a plan for fully staffing the heating division, that those technicians are fully trained, and that we're able to retain them. The median tenure for a boiler technician in public housing is 4 years. How do you build institutional knowledge when there's a constant churn of heating plant technicians in public housing?
You had 391 and now down to 248.
Outrageous.
That's a 30% loss. But I think, the mayor has put a fix on it. He says he's going to earmark $200 million to replace those boilers, some of them 50 years old. But one problem, it doesn't begin until the heated
and it's only
days
20
of July.
developments, right? It's only 20. So people at home watching, we want them to know that we're going to keep on keeping on. We're going to keep little by little, building by building, development by development, telling their stories as a news station. And then the city is going to keep on keeping on, pushing for the answers. I mean, he's head of the investigations. But the real question everybody has is, where is the money? We're giving them $200 million, right? The city is giving, that's our tax-paying money, so why should you care at home? That's our money that we're giving to NYCHA to work with. And if they haven't used the money they already have, what makes us believe they're going to use this in a good way? We need to fix the system. There needs to be, and that's why, Councilman, you are so important to this equation, because he is watching and he is going to, you said you're going to every week going to check in, right? Is this right?
We're going to have periodic check-ins to ensure that NYCHA is meeting the goals that we agree upon.
How did this get so bad, and why didn't the mayor take action earlier?
It wasn't his, I mean, it wasn't all his fault. You know, this has been for years, decades, and now it's a breaking point. And now this is the perfect storm of events, I think, Councilmember, to finally make a change for the families. Because the bottom line is the children, the seniors that are suffering right now watching this and feel like nobody's talking for them. No one's listening. We're listening and we are fighting. And it is an uphill battle, let me tell you, but we're going to continue to do it, and with your eyes on it and your investigations and us bringing it on television for people to see at home, because they don't know. A lot of people don't know that it's 10 blocks away from their home, or, you know, they don't want to speak up, you know, because of retaliation.
You got to keep watching Monica Makes It Happen.
Every night at 5:45, and we have a Facebook show. But, you know,
but you made it happen. 55, not apartments, 55 buildings as a result of your reporting.
I have to say, Redfern, a big shout out to Redfern if you're watching. I hope you're watching this beautiful show, because guess what? They were a huge reason why there was a turning point in Far Rockaway. They started the investigation. And you, Councilmember, a big shout out to you for the investigation.
I have a text. We should bring Monica to the New York City Housing Authority.
No, I think you should be there.
I have to ask you this question. Yeah. You questioned the incoming general manager who will take care of day-to-day operations.
Yes, you saw
that. He
had
no answer for you because he said he wasn't on the job yet.
Yes.
Is Victor, is he going to be the silver lining for all of this?
I'm hoping so. We are really rooting for him. I'm rooting for him, and I know the families of NYCHA are rooting for him. But you know him on a personal basis. You know him and his work. What do you think?
Well, I've known Vito for 10 years. There is no one in public service for whom I have deeper respect than Vito Mastriciullo. He's dedicated his 4 decades of his life to public service. He will master the operations of the housing authority, and he has a deep well of credibility with elected officials and with residents.
That is huge to hear that, because there's such skepticism and mistrust out there with the families. So for you to say that brings us a little bit of hope.
And I'm a sharp critic of NYCHA.
I have to ask you this question, and you mentioned it briefly earlier, Monica. If private landlords were in situations like that, we're not providing heat and hot water to their tenants.
That's right.
They'd probably be on the way to jail right now.
Right,
How is it that the city, which runs these properties, cannot get it done and is not accountable?
Right. You're great. There's a double standard. There's a lower standard of living in public housing than there is elsewhere in the city, elsewhere in the state, elsewhere in the country. But the problem is not only the leadership of NYCHA. The problem is the political establishment, right? Elected officials at every level of government have to be held accountable for historically neglecting public housing.
Who's checking on the city,
exactly
right? Everyone was like, you know, the city checks on the landlords and they crack down. Who's checking?
And everyone's
on the city?
pointing fingers.
You nailed it. That's exactly
Pointing.
the essence.
So we just have a couple of seconds left. Final thoughts. How is this going to get resolved? Are these people going to have heat and hot water?
It will get resolved because it must. Public housing is the greatest safety net of affordable housing in the United States. There are 700,000 New Yorkers who depend on NYCHA for their livelihood and their stability, so we cannot afford to get this wrong.
And there's an uprising. There's an uprising and there's an energy.
Yeah.
And we are a team, a task force. One of the residents called us a task force that's going to fight for it.
And you are, Monica, a voice for the voiceless.
Oh,
and 5:45
you too.
every day, catch your report.
Thank
Monica
you,
makes it
Mark.
happen.
Thank you.
Get heat back into more of those buildings. Thank you so much,
course,
Councilman
absolutely.
Ritchie
Thanks for
Torres
having
and
us.
Monica Morales. Thanks. We'll take a break now. When we come back, we're going to talk about the volatility in the stock market. We'll be right back. So, has the bubble burst just like it did 10 years ago? Well, that thought certainly rattled nerves this past week, and the stock market, it took record-breaking losses. On Thursday, taking the third largest point drop in history. Now, all of this leaving investors and traders bracing for more market volatility. So why is all this happening? The economy, it's healthy. Wages are up. Unemployment is down. Is this a simple course correction that happens from time to time, or is there more to it? Robert Brusca, he's an economist who knows how to read the pulse of our economy. He's always on target. He's the chief economist of Fact and Opinion Economics. Good to have you with us. Robert, so what's your read on all of this?
It's dangerous. It's real. The markets are unstable. And in the simplest possible way, you know, markets are supposed to trade on the information that's out there about the economy and about policy. And when markets can gyrate, 1,000 points in a day, that's a really bad sign. It shows you that they really don't understand where they're supposed to be, what's going on, what the economy is doing, what policy is. And it's a big indication of a loss of information and bad market functioning. This is not good. People are saying the correction is healthy. No, this kind of correction is not healthy.
Now, that's contrary to what many other economists are saying. They see this as something that's been coming for a long time, that the market has been robust, one of the best markets we've ever seen, and that this was anticipated. But you see it differently. You see it as a dangerous sign.
Well, if you're trying to walk up a mountain path and you go up the wrong path and you're 1,000 feet in the air and you decide you've gone the wrong way, the fastest way down to jump isn't the best way to get down there, right? And it's the same thing with the market. These sudden corrections are dangerous. And it was much better if the market had paired its 1,000 points over a period of time and had a chance for a measured response. This leap into the abyss is a sign of desperation.
Is it a fear of inflation, as I have read, a fear of the Feds raising interest rates again 2 or 3 times this year alone?
Well, we don't know anything about fears of inflation, right? The survey from the University of Michigan has some of the lowest numbers we've ever seen in that survey in the history of the survey. There are some people that claim that they believe in this thing called the Phillips curve, which is a relationship between unemployment and inflation. But this is a very flat relationship, and it doesn't seem to offer any risk. I think the bigger risk is really for policymakers. Policymakers seemed destined to raise rates. The Fed has this program for raising rates, and they're going to raise rates even if we don't see inflation. I think this has markets worried. And if you're thinking about it, not having any inflation, having the Fed raise interest rates could be a very destructive thing to markets and to the economy. I think the markets have a real fear, and I think the Federal Reserve officials are too afraid of inflation and aren't taking the market reaction seriously.
You don't think this is going to be a temporary thing? Do you see the volatility continuing? We're going to have more swings like this?
From what I've seen and heard from Federal Reserve officials, they are unimpressed by any of this. They think the economy is unchanged. Like you said, the market is robust. The economy is doing well. Everything's fine. Oh, we've had some turbulence in markets. So it's small potatoes, right? It's just a few percentage points that we've paired off. Maybe we'll have a real setback of 10% in the stock market, but so what? So what? That's just 10% off of a very high level. And I think this is the wrong way to look at it. I think that the concerns here are deeper, and I think the concerns are with the direction and the gradient of the path that the Fed was going to put interest rates on.
Now, we have an opportunity to talk to you, and you're looking into a crystal ball. Our viewers out there, they want to know. They have holdings in the stock market. Should they stay in, get out? What's your guidance?
Well, I think it's hard to argue that the stock market has a great deal of upside the way it's been, and I think that it makes some sense to take money off of the table when the market acts like this.
Better to shift the bonds? Are they more stable?
Well, the thing that's ungluing the stock market right now is that the interest rates are being pushed up because of these perceptions about Fed policy. But again, I don't think they're going to push interest rates up that much, because if we don't have inflation, small increases in interest rates will turn out to slow the economy much more sharply than you would imagine.
As stocks were dropping, the bonds were rising in value.
Well, of course, this is the contrary thing, right? When bond yields go up, the stock market goes down. And then when the stock market goes down, the bond yields go down. And then the stock market can go back up. And then everybody can say, oh, it's fine. But is it really? You know, this is a little bit of kabuki that's going on in the markets. You have to be very careful about where you see cause and where you see effect.
What about the policy of the current administration, the tax reform? How will this impact as we go forward with the markets?
Well, nobody knows. Everybody's guessing at this. And, you know, the problem is that, you know, he has cut the cost of capital to firms. But cost of capital doesn't always determine investments. We may not get a big investment push that would be very healthy for the economy, could increase productivity and increase growth. The tax changes themselves are substantially for the wealthy, and even that is a little bit confused because, of course, if you live in New York, and I guess some of us here do, you're in a very high property tax state, and you can't deduct those anymore, and so it's going to have various effects on people. So I don't think the tax effects are all that clear, and everybody's watching to see how powerful they're going to be.
And we're talking about inflation, the possibility of inflation. Isn't it true inherently, because historically, that rising inflation just makes stocks less attractive?
Well, sure, if it rises enough. I mean, if it rises enough, then the Federal Reserve has to chase inflation with interest rates. But of course, the Fed set a target of 2% for inflation 5 years ago, and has yet to have inflation that high. If you calculate year-to-date inflation over the last 20 years, last 25 years, on the PCE target the Fed has, for this period of 25 years, both the headline and core inflation, excluding food and energy, have consistently been under 2% on a year-to-date basis. Inflation has been very, very tame. The extent of angst and concern and fear of inflation by people, particularly at the Fed, is completely out of whack with our recent history. And I really don't understand it. I think that the market is reacting to a Federal Reserve that is deciding to run policy off of the Phillips curve, this very flat relationship. And it's one that doesn't make any sense. There are a lot of ways they can run policy, but choosing this one measure that is so out of kilter doesn't make any sense to me.
Some people say it was the higher wage growth that was reported in January had an impact here among traders. They got very concerned and left them nervous.
Well, it affected markets. And you know, the wage inflation was up 2.9%, but it's the wrong number in that report. Economists like to look at the wage measure that looks at production workers, not the one with supervisory workers. And that one was up by less than 2.5%, no change at all from past trends, basically.
So as we wrap this up, again, succinctly, put it to the investors out there, the people who have money in the stock market. What do you tell them? Stay put, this is going to pass, or this you still see danger ahead?
Well, this will pass. It could get worse before it actually passes. And I think you got to admit that given the way the stock market has been, the upside is limited. So I think taking some money off of the table makes some sense. You put some of the bond market temporarily, but remember short-term bonds, and you want to be very careful with that, because if the Fed's going to raise interest rate, bonds are going to go underwater for a while.
But what we're seeing in the market right now is going to continue. We're going to see a little bit of a roller coaster ride.
I think so.
Robert Brusca, chief economist of Fact and Opinions. Okay, I just want Fact and Opinion Economics, and you're chief economic advisor and chief economic officer. Thank you so much for joining us, and always for your insight. And that'll do it for our broadcast this week. If you have any comments or wish to see this broadcast again, log on to our website at pix11.com/newscloseup. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.